This meeting has been called to order. Please notice that all of the members of the EDA are present. Wow, like we're moving right along. George.
I'll wait till after.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. President and members of the EDA. Thank you for taking time for this special meeting. I'm on the agenda for discussion about the potential refunding of the Voyageurs National Park facility bonds and a potential item of action, which is consideration of engagement of Northland Securities, the firm that I work with, to serve as the underwriter or the purchaser of the bonds. So again, thank you for taking the time. And about 3-4 weeks ago when we called in, my colleague Tammy and I called in talking about a couple different options. Thank you for that time as well. So the item, as I noted, that is the engagement of Northland as an underwriter of the bonds or the potential refunding bonds. We've worked in that capacity 2 different times. When the bonds were originally issued in 2010 and when the bonds were refinanced in 2014. That is a capacity that Northland Securities worked with. And so I handed out a sheet with a handout with 3 pages on it. The first page I just wanted to cover briefly, and that's a bit of an overview of the different ways that municipalities, in this case the EDA, can consider the issuance of bonds. One would be a competitive sale, that is where we would put the bonds, serving as a municipal advisor, put the bonds out for competitive bid on a given date, and then present to you the low bid based upon what's called the true interest cost. That is the competitive offering. The second is a negotiated sale. That's one where the EDA would directly engage an investment bank to purchase the bonds. And there's pros and cons to both approaches in terms of the type of financing that you're considering. At the bottom of the page is just a little bit of an overview of some of the credit considerations related to the EDA and lease revenue bonds. A little bit of a refresher, I know that some of the EDA members here in front of me weren't on the EDA in 2010 or 2014. Others certainly yes, but this is of course, a lease revenue obligation where the EDA has the authority to issue the bonds. The city does not have the authority to issue this type of obligation. So this is the lease revenue obligation was used to finance the construction of the facility. Then the EDA has a lease with the federal government. The federal government makes lease payments or rental payments, if you will, to the EDA, which in turn then makes the payments on the bonds. So it's certainly a different type of financing than the sales tax bonds that we've talked about briefly as well. The sales tax bonds are backed by the city's general obligation pledge, your unlimited ability to tax or raise taxes to make debt service payments on the bonds. So this is one that, again, there's the 2 different financing approaches. I'm sitting here today with the ability to issue the bonds under either approach. I can be your municipal advisor and put it out for competitive bid, or like we did in 2010 and 2014, Northland could serve as that underwriter, or the one that buys the bonds and then directly from the EDA, and then turns around and sells those bonds to investors. It's my recommendation, and again, I'm happy to help the EDA in either capacity. It is my recommendation that this is a unique type of financing, the lease revenue obligation. You've got a very solid connection here, if you will, where you've got the U.S. government paying the EDA. There's a good credit rating that's been assigned, AA3 with Moody's Investor Service to the 2014 refunding bonds. But The advantage of working across the table, if you will, from the investment bank that directly buys your bonds is the ability to pre-market the bonds. On a competitive sale, and the competitive sale is a very good option as well as the negotiated sale. I don't want to make it sound like one's bad and one is good. For the sales tax bonds, I'm definitely in the camp that says let's look at the competitive bid. General obligation bonds are sold in a high volume each business day in America. When you get a good credit rating like we would expect the City of International Falls may receive on the sales tax bonds, those ones are sold Monday through Thursday typically, high volume. It's one that we have no problem saying, serving as your municipal advisor, will readily put that out to bid, provided you get the general obligation backing and a good credit rating. Those ones are a good avenue to sell by the competitive bid. On the negotiated sale for the lease revenue bond, I think it's a good fit, as it was in 10 and 14. It gives us the ability to pre-market your bonds several weeks in advance. We would let investors know that, hey, we've got this bond issue coming. In fact, we'd probably go to those same investors that bought this in 10 and bought this in 14, ask them if they'd be interested to repurchase the bonds. Through this process, what you would do is refinance the 14 bonds. Those investments that investors have on their books would get taken away, and then potentially, if they're interested, they could repurchase those. So again, it allows for a broader period of time to gauge investor support, gauge the market acceptance of interest rates, and then if the support is broad, we can tighten those interest rates and potentially, I'm not saying that this would give you a better result. It may give you a better result, but it just is a broader timeline. And that's my primary reason to recommend the negotiated approach for this transaction is a greater period of time to market the bonds. That's as a parallel to the competitive bid. What you have a very limited window of time an investor does to decide, hey, do I want to buy these bonds? And an investment bank as well. And so again, the pencil may not be as sharp on the competitive bid. It's, Mr. President, members of the board, please let me know if you have any questions along the way.
I have a question for you. So the original bonds, we can't call them until October 1st of next year, is that correct?
Good question. Because the bonds are taxable, it allows you to actually refinance them. Let me answer this a little bit better. If these bonds were tax exempt, the answer to that would be we can't wait, or we have to wait until...
Have to wait for the call date.
Yes.
Okay.
We're able to do an advance refunding bond like this because of the taxable nature of the bonds. It used to be that we had to wait until the call date, it used to be that we could advance refund taxable or tax exempt bonds. But when the public finance law was changed a couple of years ago, only taxables can be done in advance now.
Okay, and then follow-up question. Yep. So as far as investors are concerned, would that, since we're calling almost a year early, than what we had advertised was our potential call date, is that going to have any adverse effect on potential investors moving forward, or they don't look at it? I know I look at it. So I'm just wondering, as a person who invests in bonds, I'm just wondering if we, is somebody going to look at that? Is it potentially going to be adverse by calling early? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Does it mean we should? Does it mean we should? Is my question.
Well, two ways to answer that question. One is from the issuer standpoint, being the EDA. If you can, should you? If you can achieve savings like we're showing, which is actually an update is on the next page, not to jump around, but if you can look at a potential savings of $500,000.
Right.
I would say the answer to the issuer is yes, you should. Now, from the investor standpoint, now you, the issuer, you don't even know who the investors are, typically, unless the community banks in town purchase some of the bonds, and they want you to know that they purchased them. You typically don't know who the other side of the equation is, being whether it be Wall Street or an individual down the street.
Sure.
So it's your ability to prepay the bonds or call them a year early shouldn't be seen as a negative from the investment community. They would be looking at it and saying, hey, my bond legally is going to be taken away or called. What am I going to replace it with? And
Right.
so if they like the investment, they like the security behind the investment, then they shouldn't turn away from it.
But at half the interest rate, so probably go out and look for another 4 if you can find one.
Well, excellent point.
I mean,
Because-
again, I have to preface this with I'm totally for this. I just want to make sure that it's not that it doesn't have an adverse effect that we can't find somebody to invest in it, because the people that are currently invested seem, they would believe that they have another 10 months of payments coming their way when we call it prematurely, and then we're going to reinvest, we're going to turn around and half our interest rate and then throw it back out there and be like, you're going to make half of what you were going to make. Are you interested? So it was just, I'm all for this. I just want to make sure that, because you had mentioned marketing it to current investors, but if I'm going to lose half of what my potential profit was, probably might not be interested. Might be looking for another 4 if you can find one, which good luck in this market. But
we didn't practice this beforehand, just so the rest of you know. The next page actually shows the trend of interest rates. And an investor on the other side of the equation, the thick black line, I should say, is the current market in 2019. The other lines are the years 2018 through 15. But the thick black line at the bottom of the page certainly is why we're talking about refinancing, because you can see certainly positive not from the investment side, but from the saving money side, that those investors that get these bonds called away from their investment portfolio understand that it's a different market now too. So can they go out and find that 4 or 5% interest rate? Not really in the current environment, or at least not with this credit.
right, not without risk.
Correct, yes. And so, thank you for those questions. Those are good questions about kind of the nuts and bolts, if you will. You, the issuer, when you can see or achieve potentially $500,000 in savings, wholeheartedly, yes, I would support that. Provided, here you're looking at a present value savings of almost 5%. Looking at reducing your interest rate from 4.8% down to 2.6%. So a very good environment to look at this. Annual savings of about $46,000 per year. Mr. President, if I could segue into one other comment, and that's as part of the process of working directly with Northland on the refinancing of these bonds. If the EDA supports that, there's one step that we would consider at your next meeting, and that's what's called a parameters resolution. And what it does is it says that, in so many words, it says that the president and we'd probably change it to the secretary would have the ability to lock in the interest rates on any date, provided that you can achieve a certain level of savings. And that's a level of savings that you would define. It wouldn't be $300,000 of savings, because that's very achievable. It would be something that, again, mutually we would look at the savings, look at the current bond market, and say, hey, is this $516,000 of overall savings achievable? If it looks favorable, again, maybe we would back off a little bit from that. But it opens up a window, it opens up a lot of flexibility in terms of timing. The typical financing process with the competitive sale is pick a date at your next, let's say once you've got your bond security in place, you've got your bond rating, you've got your bond offering document put together, and then you might set a date for the next month. So looking out 30 days from now, what are the interest rates going to be? We just don't know that. Is there going to be 10 sales totaling 500 million coming to market? It's the point I'm trying to make on that parameters resolution. It gives you flexibility because it allows you to float with the market. Maybe you can capture one of those days when interest rates are down. Again, so that's the rationale there, members of the board. So I jumped ahead a little bit. That would be if you do engage Northland as your underwriter or purchaser of the bonds, that a parameters resolution would be likely for your next regular EDA. Any questions, Mr. President or members of the board?
No?
Let's do it. I have some comments.
Yes, please.
Mr. President, Commissioner, so George and I have talked on numerous occasions about this, preceding any of the meetings that you've had. And as George pointed out, Northland Securities has been the municipal advisor for the EDA on both the original issue and the refunding bonds back in 2014. And I think we issued those or signed the documents in the first month I was here, and I was concerned with one of the provisions in there, and we talked about call, or Commissioner Kraus brought up the call feature, and I think the first call date is in 2020, the second one in 2021, and then 2022, and all three of those have a premium on the call, meaning that we have to pay 103% in 20, 102% in 21, and 100% or 101% in 2022. So we're paying a premium to the people that hold those bonds because we're calling them presumably early, and I would never put a premium, and I used to do what George did back in the 80s with a competing firm that was not an underwriter but was an independent municipal advisor. And I think that's taking some of the savings away from the EDA with this particular issue because there's a premium put on there, and I questioned it at the time, but the train had already left the station essentially for that. So, but I was also not expecting that the interest rates would further go down as low as they are now, that there'd be savings that we'd be doing this again. So, and there is appreciable savings, and it makes sense that we move forward, in my opinion. But I'm not sold personally that we should move forward in a direct or a negotiated sale with Northland Securities serving as our advisor, because we don't, as an underwriter rather, because I don't know that we can be sure that we're getting the best deal, whereas if you set it on a competitive sale on a set date, you're going to know on that date that you're getting the best interest rate possible because it's out there for anybody to bid on it. And George has been good about pointing out that with a direct sale, they can pre-sell it and try and generate some interest with investors before we actually pick a date. But picking a date is like having a crystal ball. How do you know when the right date is? We won't know it if we set a date through the competitive process. And I don't know, maybe Joe would be better because he's in the bond market, would know better about, this is a great date, or let's wait 3 more days, because nobody really knows. I mean, what you want to do is pick a date where we have savings that we're acceptable with. And George has pointed out that their principal interest is serving our best interest, but I just have a bias that I think the best way of assuring that is going out on a competitive sale. So the way I see the options is we can engage Northland Securities to be our municipal advisor and to do it on a competitive sale basis, both for the refunding bonds as well as the sales tax supported bonds. Or we can engage them, as George is suggesting, to work as the underwriter, and then there's a draft agreement that was included in our packet materials that I had out there for us to engage them as the underwriter. So we would need to act on that, or we can seek proposals from other firms to get bids that could do it either on a negotiated or a competitive basis and get opinions from others. That's a lot more work for me, and Northland Securities can do both, but my bias is to stay away from the direct negotiated sale and to just do it on a competitive basis, and have them, they'll get a fee as our municipal advisor in either case. But we can also look at other firms and have them market these bonds for us if we want to as well. So I think those are the three basic options that you can consider moving forward. And George and Tammy have spent some time already. They have a familiarity with this issue, having issued both the first two bonds for us. But I just think it's cleaner, and we can be assured of getting the best interest rate on a given day by going competitive.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Devil's advocate. What are the chances that the bond market rebounds? Bond market rebounds in January/February every single year like clockwork, and it goes down right before Christmas like clockwork. So what is to say that we're going to be able to, if we do a competitive sale, get in and actually save money? Is there a risk that we could lose it if the bond market flips back over and it goes back up? We could potentially lose money on this, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say you would lose money. And your city administrator, I think Ken has done a great job of meeting with me, reviewing the options with me, and so I really appreciate that. As Ken noted, and I don't want to get on the wrong side of Ken, the competitive sale, like he noted, gives you the best opportunity on a given day, and that's the part that on a refunding, I always kind of equate it to like refinancing my home mortgage, where if I'm going to refinance my mortgage, I want to kind of have an interest rate in mind. And I'm going to keep in touch with my mortgage banker and say, hey, George or Bill, my mortgage banker, let me know when it hits 3%, for example. And then let's lock in on that date. And that's kind of the whole philosophy, if you will, of how this parameters resolution works, is there's going to be up days, there's going to be down days, there's going to be days with more volume in the market than others. And so it just gives you a broader window of time to ride the waves, if you will, and potentially lock in on a date. Now, it might be that the day that you lock in either case, you might achieve 30,000 more the next day if you would have waited one day. But again, if we all had that kind of prognostication.
You need a crystal ball for that.
Right. And actually, Ken brought up a point that I didn't make, and I appreciate him mentioning this, the call premium. And Joe, this actually answers your question in terms of the current investors, and I misspoke earlier, I apologize, but the bonds, you're able to refinance them and make it a current refunding, meaning that you don't have to wait a year until the call date if you pay this premium. Both the 10 bonds and the 14 bonds had what's called a call premium, meaning that in this case it's maybe 3% of the amount of principal that's being refunded to give you the opportunity to go out and refinance the bonds. That's already factored in, that call premium. When I show you on that page 2, the refunding summary, the net savings, it is just that. It's net of any cost of doing business. It's net of the premium to pay to call the bonds. So that's already factored in. If I ever, on a new refunding bond, have that call premium in there, I know Ken's going to take me out behind the woodshed. And because that's something we're not going to put in there. That's something that shouldn't go into a new refunding. There's been markets in the past where actually when the original bonds in 2010 were done, I'm sorry if I'm taking more time than...
We have another meeting at 6.
Yes, no, you're fine.
The bonds in 2010, what the rating agency said is, hey, we're only going to give you an A1 bond rating because we want to see the project built. And so that's why the call premium was put on. It allowed you the ability to call these bonds after the project was built. Come back when you can potentially get a better credit rating, which the city and EDA did, or the EDA did, and then the bonds were refinanced 4 years later. And so a typical call date is approximately halfway or a little bit earlier than halfway through the term. So these bonds go out to 2031. And so a call date that would be with kind of a standard call date in this market would be about a 2027 or 2028. So what you would likely see on a new bond is no call premiums, but the bonds become callable in 2000. And again, that's a date that will get worked out in either 27 or 28 and any date thereafter without any prepayment penalty. But there wouldn't be the opportunity of a call premium like we have on these ones.
Okay. Does everyone on the EDA at this point feel that they have enough background information before we make a decision on what we have before us? Because I think, going back, I just want to give a little background. We had a issue on the city council a couple weeks ago, and we didn't have enough information. We had one of our councilors made a motion, and nobody seconded it, and we didn't know where he was coming from. And so I just want to make sure that everyone has a good understanding of what George has brought up and what the administrator has brought up. Does everyone feel comfortable at this point to make a motion moving forward? Okay, so we have three things that are sitting before us. So we have three options. We can use Northland Securities in a competitive bond, which is the suggestion of Administrator Anderson. We can use Northland Securities as an underwriter, as what George has pointed out, or we can go a third route, which would be to work with another firm moving forward. As president of the EDA, I would accept a motion to move forward at this time.
You got the city administrator saying one thing, and you have the bond representative saying something else. So I'm having a difficult time figuring out which one I'm going against.
Well, and here's the point that I'd like to make as the president of the EDA. This is probably one of the best things I've ever seen. We've had pros and cons on both sides. We've gotten information on both sides, and now it's a very, very fair judgment of this board of how we want to move forward. I know how I feel, but with that being said, anybody can make a motion moving forward at this time.
I'll make a motion.
And you.
Please.
You can make a motion. I would motion that we follow Administrator Anderson's recommendations.
Okay, we have a motion to go with Northland Securities as a competitive bond.
I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go with a competitive bond with Northland Securities. Discussion.
So my question now would be, what is our target date for an offer? Because again, come January, February, the bond market's going to rebound. It has every single year for the last 20 years. So we're down now, which is normal, but when are we looking at the potential offer date? Because that could really impact our rate.
Yes, an update would be in your savings. And just as an FYI, a 0.1% equals $55,000 of interest with this bond structure. So if the interest rate's up or down 0.1 or 0.3%, you're looking at a decent swing in savings.
150,000.
Right. Mayor,
Yep.
I really appreciate the open, dialogue.
Yep.
This has been good. And Ken and I get along well, so don't, at least I'm saying that, I hope.
Yep.
I think he feels the same way.
And so, regardless of what's decided here, we're going to continue a good working on it. The reason why I came up kind of advocating one approach over the other is just that, kind of the uncertainty of future bond markets. And if you don't know with a competitive bid environment if you achieved your level until that date. Where if you've got the more flexible direct purchase or negotiated sale market, then you've got kind of a broader window of time. Get your credit rating in place, and then you've got a period of time where we can monitor the bond market. So on refunding, and again, if I'm speaking out of turn, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
It just is more flexible, more opportunity to hit the market when it's in your favor versus picking a day, 30 days in advance. Now, when can you schedule a sale? This is the EDA sale, and so I know that the EDA can be flexible on when you meet. I know, but typically with a competitive sale timeline, we would be picking your regular meeting date in a given month. And that's, I apologize.
Quarterly.
Quarterly, okay. So it would be a special meeting.
Yeah.
And so the timeline, I was talking internally about, okay, what are we looking at for a window of getting the bond offering document updated, getting the legal part updated, getting a bond rating assigned? We'd probably be looking mid to late January at the earliest, with the potential of that going into the first part of February. And so, just kind of picking a date in advance is a little challenging then, just because of the moving parts on the timeline. So I can't give you a date certain at this point. Even on the negotiated side, I can't give you a date certain. We can kind of just, that window opens once we've got that credit rating in hand. And so, best I can say is it would be the latter part of January to the first part of February.
Okay.
Are we out of, so I mean, if we can't make this happen, following Joe's point, if we can't make this happen December, are we better off waiting till, it starts going down again, it looks like in June, and I don't know anything about bonds. I've just been trying to trail everything that people are saying. So, are we just kind of out of that time frame to make either one of these happen before rates predicted to go up in January, February, that we're looking at, we should wait till June, or are we still okay?
Past performance doesn't predict future results.
Historically, we see the softest part of the market or the lowest interest rates during those winter months, kind of right around the end of the year, first part of the year. And not every year is the same, of course, but we know where we're at in this market. And when you can see that thick black line on that last page trending down, that's certainly positive. Could it take an uptick after the first of the year? Certainly it could. But under either approach, if we see that market move up and your savings eroded, we can...
Election year, it should continue to go down.
Okay, that was going to be my next question too. Is this kind of like, once you commit, you're kind of like until the end, and you're just kind of a roller coaster, but we could just pull the plug?
Administrator Anderson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, or President, just to bring, I think we're looking at the same time frame, whether it's a direct sale, other than there's a couple-week window we can work within, or a competitive sale. We still need to do an offering statement or an official statement and prepare that, and so there's some time that's going to be necessary for them, serving as our municipal advisor or our underwriter, to prepare that. But I want to make sure that the EDA understands a couple of things in this engagement agreement, and it's the letter dated November 13th, engagement of Northland Securities as underwriter, and it says a couple of things here. In engaging Northland in this capacity as underwriter, the issuer should be aware of the following. It says the authority is responsible for understanding and assessing the implications of the issue. So when Northland acts as the underwriter for the issue, they will provide advice to the authority with respect to the structure, timing, and stuff. Then later it says Northland will purchase and arrange for the placement of the bonds with the issue in an arm's length commercial transaction with the authority. So they're not working with us, it's an arm's length transaction between Northland Securities and the authority. It further says on the top of page 2, it says Northland has a duty to purchase the issue from the authority at a fair and reasonable price, but must balance that duty with its duty to sell municipal securities to investors at prices that are fair and reasonable. And then most key, I think, as it says, is under federal securities laws, Northland does not have a legal fiduciary duty to the authority, unlike a municipal advisor, and is therefore not required by federal law to act in the best interest of the authority without regard to its own financial interests. Northland has financial and other interests that differ from those of the issuer. And that's my philosophical problem with working directly with any underwriting firm, is that who here can really say that on this respective day that these are good terms, it was structured right, and that this is reflective of what's in the market today. I used to be in that business and I couldn't do that without doing some other in-depth research, and so we kind of depend on our financial advisors to do that for us, or municipal advisor, and I think Northland Securities can do that for us, serving as a municipal advisor. But if they do that, that is, serve as our municipal advisor, structure the bond issue to our best interests, they can't buy the bonds as an underwriter and then remarket them to other investors. Whereas if they serve as underwriter, they can structure it in a way that's going to make it more attractive and easier for them to market it. But the question is that in our best interest as an EDA and as the issuer of the bonds? And I would suggest that by having the call premiums previously, that did not serve our best interest, and it was unnecessary to be able to market those bonds. George might differ, but that would be, I'm fairly confident in that. And you put an early call feature on and you have no premium, and then your interest rates might be a little bit higher if it's harder to accept in the market. But it's a very secure debt. As George pointed out, the federal government's AA plus rated. It's a secure, non-cancelable lease. Things would have to get pretty bad for this lease not to get paid. And it's a very secure debt, and I think going out competitively would work. I also visited with somebody from Citibank at the session I went to last Thursday and just posed that question to them as an underwriter, and they said a AA rated lease supported by the federal government would be very acceptable by any underwriter in the competitive market. So that's why I'm suggesting what I am. The agreement, the reason why we have this agreement is so that, and we need to sign off on it, is so that it's very clear to us as an issuer and as an EDA that they're compelled to do this by federal law and the Securities Exchange Commission to make sure that we're fully aware of this dual role that they're serving.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to utilize Northland Securities as a municipal advisor and to go out for a competitive bond. Does anybody have any questions on the motion that we have on the floor? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
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 And I'll vote yes. The motion carries. We will use Northland Securities as a municipal advisor and go seek a competitive bond for the EDA for the lease. I don't believe we have anything else on our agenda this evening.
Mr. President?
Yes?
I would ask you to direct a question to George about whether we need a separate agreement for them to serve as municipal advisor to the city that the EDA could act on for this capacity, or in this capacity. Or do you need a separate agreement to serve as our municipal advisor?
There would be you've given me the direction.
Yep.
And thank you for that.
Yep.
Ken, but there's a separate, what's called municipal advisor agreement that would be separate action. you've taken the step to engage us in that capacity. So, but there is a separate municipal advisory agreement that states what our duties are, have a standard language for municipal advisors and what our compensation is. I don't have that agreement with me this evening. I should have, I apologize, but we'll certainly get that up to your administrator.
Since we are still meeting here and we're talking on the same issue, would the EDA be acceptable to, with the city administrator looking over that document, give consent to signing that document as it comes in with the administrator's acknowledgement? I would take a motion just so we have an official.
So moved.
We have a motion to have the administrator and the president to sign any forms that may come forward for the previous motion that we have just made. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Buller. Any discussion? Hearing none? Oh,
Not Mayor, President. Actually, it would be, we'll have President and Secretary.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. So,
Yep.
all right, so we know who's going to be signed. Any other discussion? Hearing none, question?
Aye.
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 And I'll vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. Without, thank you so much, George, for your time. I do appreciate it. All right, we have 5 minutes before our next meeting, so we're going to call this one adjourned.